Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Wednesday. Yom Revi'i. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Yosef in Englewood, New Jersey. Stephen in New Hampshire. Sharon in New Jersey. Bill in Mid-Missouri. Joe in the Inland Empire. Guy in Ohio. Nancy in North Carolina. Bella in Florida. Melissa in Great Neck. Shandor in the Bronx. Lucy in Minnesota, Ella in California, Marjorie in Georgia, Spencer in Connecticut, Charles in Omaha, Chaim in Florida, Karen in Northern California. Welcome, everybody. Great to be learning with you today. Today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by my good friend Alicia Liebhard. In honor of Sal and Nina, thank you so much, Alicia, for helping us to share more Torah with more people around the world. May you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings, and we say Amen. Okay, we got a good head start on today's page yesterday, so we can do a double daf today. Help us get caught up. Our dafs today are pages 153 and 154 here in Tractate Bava Basra, the 23rd volume of the Talmud. We're in chapter 9, and today opening Mishna number 8. If one didn't, and we're picking this up right near the bottom of page 153a. If one did not write in the deed, so a deed of transfer that's being given as a gift to someone, and is he on his deathbed or is he not on the deathbed? So he is on the deathbed, but he didn't write that this deed of transfer is being made while on his deathbed. So he didn't write in the deed that he was on his deathbed, and he then recovered from his illness, and he wished to retract the gift. And he says, I was on my deathbed, and since I recovered, I can retract the gift, right? That's what we learned in the last Mishnah, that if he gives away everything and leaves nothing for himself, and he does that while on his deathbed, so then we can assume he did that because he was on his deathbed and he expected to die. And if he then recovers, so he can, recover the gift. He doesn't have to give all his property to this person if he recovers. Well, a healthy person who writes a deed of transfer and it's properly executed and everything, so then it's obviously not made in contemplation of his imminent death. And so then the recipient might acquire all of it. So it certainly makes a difference if he's on the deathbed or not. So here there was a deed of transfer, and the question is, was he on his deathbed or not? He didn't write in the deed of transfer, which the witnesses saw written and then handed over, that he was on the deathbed. So later, when he recovers and he says, I thought I was going to die. I recovered, so I don't want to give this property away. So he says, I was on my deathbed. But the recipients of the gift say, no, you weren't on your deathbed when you made this gift to us. You were healthy, and therefore the gift cannot be retracted. You gave it. There was a deed. We received the deed. There was a kinyan. Now it's our property. You don't get to retract it because when you made the gift, you were healthy. So in this situation, says the Mishnah, the giver must bring proof that he was on his deathbed in order to retract the gift. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir, the minority opinion. And the rabbis say, the majority, that the burden of proof rests on the claimant, which is the general principle. If you want to get money out of somebody through litigation, well, you, as the plaintiff trying to extract money from the defendant, you have the burden of proof. So the rabbis say the burden of proof rests upon the claimant. And since the property is currently in the possession of the giver, right? It's his property. It hasn't been given away. Therefore, the recipients of the gift must bring proof that they have the right to receive it. Meaning they have to prove that when this giver of the property made the gift, that he was healthy and not contemplating his death, and therefore he cannot retract it. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. There was a deed pertaining to a certain gift of a person on his deathbed, in which it was written that the gift was bestowed when the giver was sick and lying in his bed. But the continuation of the standard formula, and now we see that there's a standard formula for somebody who is making a deathbed gift, right? So the continuation would be when I am sick, the person is sick and lying in his bed, and from his sickness, he departed to his eternal home. Well, this was not written. So what we see now is the person did die. He made a gift while he was sick on his deathbed. He gave away all this property, and then he died. But it doesn't say in the deed of transfer that he died of his sickness. Presumably the witnesses were there. They saw that the gift was made orally. It was recorded in this deed. And it was recorded also there that not only he made the gift while he was sick on his deathbed, but then he died of that sickness. But that continuation of the standard formula is not present in this deed of transfer. So what's going to happen? The heirs, right, his heirs who would be disinherited if that gift was made to some other party, they're going to say, well, he was sick when he made the gift, but then he got better. And so he retracted the gift because he got better. He recovered. So the gift was invalidated. And then later, he died of something else. So therefore, the property was not given to this recipient on the deathbed. The giver recovered. Later, he died of something else. And we, the heirs, right, the sons of this man, we have inherited the property and we weren't disinherited. We didn't lose it to this recipient. That's the argument. The giver's heirs claimed that although he was ill when he wrote the deed, he later recovered and his gift is not valid. Now on page 153b. Rabbah said he is dead and his grave proves that he died. Right? We know that he was sick. He was lying on his deathbed, so sick that he gave away all his property to somebody in order to disinherit his sons. And then he died. Must be that he died of the sickness that he had when he was on his deathbed. It may therefore be assumed that he did not recover from his sickness, and therefore their gift remains valid. That was Rabbah's view. Abaye said to him, and now, if in the case of a ship that sank, where the fate of most of the passengers of sunken ships is to perish, and the stringencies of the living and the stringencies of the dead are applied to them due to the uncertainty as to whether they are alive or dead. So in the case of sick people, where the fate of most sick people is to recover, is to return to life, all the more so is it not clear that one should assume that he recovered from the illness and his gift is valid. Right? When a ship sinks, most people, especially in the ancient world, when a ship sank, most people died from the ship sinking. Very rare that if a ship at sea sank, that somehow somebody was going to survive because there was a passing ship that rescued them, etc. Very rare. So most people die. And yet, we can't assume that everyone is dead, right? And so in the case of a husband who was on that ship, and his wife, right, who now is not going to be able to remarry until we have some evidence that he died, she can't remarry because we can't assume that he died. It's possible that when the ship was sinking, he was rescued, he was taken, maybe he was taken as a captive and made into a galley slave on an Algerian ship. Now he's in Africa somewhere. But he's alive, and therefore she can't remarry. We can't assume that he died, even though most people who were in a ship in ancient times that sank would be dead. Now, with respect to a person who gets ill, even gravely ill, Still, most people recover from being sick, so how can we assume that he died of that sickness? The more common thing is that people get better. And if he died later, it could have been from something else. So how can we assume that he died of the same sickness that he had and allow, this person who's not the son, the heir of the person who was sick, to receive all his property? We have to take into account the possibility that indeed he recovered and that therefore the heirs are entitled to the money and not this third party. We can't just assume that he died of that disease. If they want to get the money from the heirs, they want to take the money away from his natural heirs, they're going to have to prove that he died of the disease that he had at the time that he made the gift. They have the burden of proof, is what Abaye is saying. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, said, in accordance with whose opinion is that law, that halacha of Rabbah? That Rabbah is saying, well, he was lying on his deathbed, he gave away all his property, and now he's dead. We should assume he died of the sickness. In accordance with whose law is that? It is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Nassan, as it is taught in a Baraisa with regard to a case where one who gave his property to others claims that since he was on his deathbed at the time, he can retract the gifts, and the recipients claim that he was healthy and cannot retract it. Who removes the property from whose possession? The giver can remove it from the recipient's possession without proof, as the property was previously established to be in his possession. But the recipients can remove it from the giver's possession only with proof. This is the statement of Rabbi Yaakov, right? So that seems to square with Abaye. But Rabbi Nassan says the presumption is that the current situation reflects the situation at the time that the gift was bestowed. Therefore, if he is currently healthy, the obligation is upon him to bring proof that he was on his deathbed when he gave his property to others. And if he is currently on his deathbed, the obligation is upon the recipients to bring proof that he was healthy when he made the gift to them, right? So what is the status quo that we're going to follow? The status quo that the property was in the possession of the person, who spent a lifetime amassing it, and therefore to take it away from him or his heirs, they have the burden of proof. Or is the status quo that, well, right now, he's dead, so he must have died of something. What did he die of? Well, last thing we heard was that he was on his deathbed, so that's probably what he died of. Therefore, the gift was valid, and the heirs have to overcome the burden of proof. That would be the opinion of Rabbi Nassan. Rabbi Elazar says, and with regard to a case of uncertain tumah, uncertain ritual impurity. Okay, so now we're going to go, we're not really digressing. We're going to go look at another area of the law, right? If somebody became tameh, so we've talked many times, but in case someone is new, very important concepts in the Torah and in the Talmud. Is someone tahor or tameh? Right? So tahor means ritually pure, tameh means ritually impure. This has nothing to do with disease or coming into contact with COVID or something like that. We're talking about coming into contact with a source of ritual impurity, like a dead body, like a woman during her menses, like a creature, a dead creeping thing that fell into an oven. All of these can transmit tumah, ritual impurity, and they would invalidate, for example, a food that was consecrated as terumah, which is the first tithe, and given to a priest, where the food and the priest would have to be in a state of ritual purity before they could eat it. The food had to be tahor, ritually pure, and the priest would have to be tahor, ritually pure, before he could eat it. And there's other areas of the law where you need to know, is something tahor or tameh, pure or impure? And when there's a case of uncertainty, we're not sure. Did this food become tameh or not? Did this person become tameh or not? We would look at, well, what was the last known status of that food or of that person? So let's see. Rabbi Elazar said, and with regard to a case of uncertain tumah, the law depends on the same dispute. And this is as we learned in a Mishna, Tractate Taharos 6:7. The law is that a case where it is uncertain if something or someone became tameh, and it was in the public domain, So if it was in the public domain, the item or the person is deemed pure. Right? If it happened, the case of uncertainty occurred in the public domain, where there's lots of people and lots of objects, most of which are not tameh. So in that case, in a case of uncertainty, we're going to be lenient and say that he is still tahor. But with regard to an expanse of fields which are privately owned, right? So with regard to an expanse of fields in the summer, when many people pass through the fields, it is considered the private domain with regard to the laws of Shabbos, but it is considered the public domain with regard to the laws of tumah. And if one is uncertain as to whether he was rendered impure there, he is deemed pure, right? So what they're saying is in the case of fields, farm fields, in the summer, which in Israel is the dry months, right, when the crops are not growing there, and so lots of people walk through, because no one cares if you walk through a field. You're not doing damage to the crops there. And you're not walking through mud. So a lot of people walk through. We're going to treat it like a public domain, even though it might be privately owned. But in the winter months, which is the rainy season in Israel, when the crops are planted, and where a farmer would object if somebody walked through his field where crops are planted and are just starting to sprout, where it also becomes muddy, and for both reasons, because people don't want to walk through mud and because people don't want to, farmers object if somebody walks through their planted fields. So then we treat the private domain as a private domain, and if there's a case of uncertainty there, we're going to be stringent and say that the person is tameh. If we're unsure whether he's tameh or not, in a private domain, we say he is tameh. If we're unsure whether a person is tameh or not in a public domain, we say he's tahor. But with the case of these fields, in the summer, we treat them like a public domain. In the winter, we treat them like a private domain. In the rainy season, when not many people pass through the fields, a series of fields is considered the private domain, both with regard to the laws of Shabbos and the laws of tumah. Therefore, if one is uncertain whether he was rendered impure there, he is deemed impure. If one does not know whether the day he entered the series of fields was considered part of the summer or part of the rainy season, and he is uncertain whether he was rendered impure there, double uncertainty. Did he come into contact with a source of impurity while he was in that field? And did it happen during the summer months or the rainy months? Double uncertainty. So Rabbi Yaakov maintains that he retains the status of purity that he held before he entered the fields. How are we going to be stringent when there's a doubt on a doubt? Not sure if he came into contact with the source of impurity, and not sure if we're during the period of stringency or the period of leniency of the year. According to Rabbi Nassan, it is presumed that he entered the fields during the same season in which he came to ask whether he was rendered impure. So we remove that aspect of uncertainty. If he comes to ask during the rainy season, we say he entered the field during the rainy season. Rava disagrees with Rabbi Lazar and says they taught the ruling of the Mishnah only with regard to a case where the rainy season had not yet passed over the fields after the possibility arose that the fields contained impurity, like they discovered that a body was buried there that was unknown previously. So if you walk through a field in which a body is buried, did you walk over the grave or not? That would be the first uncertainty. And then did it happen in the winter or did it happen in the summer? But if the rainy season, right, when we are more stringent, if the rainy season has already passed over the fields, right, so that now it is considered the private domain, both with regard to Shabbos and with regard to tumah, then even though the one who passed through the fields came to ask about his status in the summer, when we're more lenient, when the fields should be considered the public domain, he is nevertheless deemed impure, even according to Rabbi Nassan, and there is no parallel dispute with regard to uncertain tumah. So we're multiplying cases of uncertainty. Why is this relevant now? Because what we're talking about is a person who was ill, gave away his property, and later was dead. And we don't know if he recovered from the illness, in which case he would have invalidated the gift that he made while on his deathbed, and then he died of something else, in which case at that point when he dies, his property goes to his heirs. Or perhaps he did die of the illness that he had while on his deathbed, and therefore the gift that he gave while on his deathbed and then he died remains the property of the recipient of the gift. And so even though the property hasn't literally changed hands yet, the heirs have it, but they're going to have to give it away to the recipients who received the gift, in name from the giver while he was on his deathbed. So what is our presumption going to be? Are we going to say, well, he's dead now, he was sick then, so he must have died of that sickness? Or are we going to say, well, most people recover from being sick, so he probably recovered, and if he's dead now, it's because he died of something else. Now, the Mishna teaches, and the rabbis say the burden of proof rests upon the claimant. And since the property is currently in the possession of the giver, if he's still alive, or it's in the possession of his heirs, then the recipients, the ones who, were the beneficiary of this deathbed gift, they have to bring proof that they have the right to receive it. Either because the person was healthy when he made the gift, right? In which case there's no deathbed retraction for when somebody gets better, or because he was on his deathbed and then he died of that sickness, and for that reason they get to receive it. But they're going to have to prove that. Now we're on page 154a. So the Gemara asks, with regard to the proof that the recipients must bring, in what manner is it brought? What kind of proof do they bring? So Rav Huna says the proof is presented by bringing witnesses who testify that the giver was healthy, right? So it had nothing to do with a deathbed. He made the gift when he was healthy, and so the gift stands. So they can bring witnesses who say the guy was healthy when he made the gift. They're going to keep the gift. Or they're going to receive the gift. They're going to extract it from his heirs. Or they're going to extract it from him if he's now later saying, no, I gave this gift while I was on my deathbed and then I got better. And they're coming to say, no, you were healthy. You weren't on your deathbed. So that's what they're arguing about. So they have to bring witnesses that he was healthy when he made the gift. Rav Chisda and Rabba bar Rav Huna say the proof is presented by the ratification of the deed. I.e., the recipients are required only to ascertain that the signatures of the witnesses on the deed are authentic in order to prove that it is not forged. Now, what are we talking about? Are we talking about a deed that says I was sick and, therefore I got better later? Or a deed that says, no, I'm just giving it to you. And here are the witnesses that were witnesses to the gift. And if he's now going to claim that he was on his deathbed, but that's not written in the deed, then if all the recipients have to show is that it's a legitimate deed with proper witnesses. Since it doesn't say anything about being on the deathbed, seems like the giver or his heirs are going to have to show, no, but he was on his deathbed. Now, the Gemara explains, Rav Huna says that the proof is presented by bringing witnesses. And he maintained that the guy was healthy. So he maintains that Rabbi Meir and the majority, right, in our Mishnah, disagree with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute of Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Nassan that we just mentioned before. So the Gemara notes a mnemonic device that indicates which opinions of the Tanaim are correlated. So this mnemonic, memory device is maniach, which represents the letters Mem, Nun, Yud, and Ches. And this stands for Meir, Nassan, Yaakov, and the rabbis as a whole. So this indicates that Rabbi Meir, who says that the giver must bring proof that he was on his deathbed, holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Nassan, who maintains that one presumes that the current situation reflects the situation at the time that the gift was bestowed. He's now dead, so we assume that he died of that sickness. And the rabbis who say that the recipients must bring proof that the giver was healthy hold in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov, So who talk about, the presumption earlier. So Rav Chisda and Rabba bar Rav Huna say that the proof is presented by the ratification of the deed. So the Gemara explains, Rav Chisda and Rabba bar Rav Huna maintain that Rabbi Meir and the rabbis disagree with regard to whether, when there is a debtor who admits that he wrote a promissory note, the creditor must ratify it in court in order to collect payment. And the same ruling would apply in a case where the person on his deathbed admits that he wrote the deed granting the gift. And they explain that Rabbi Meir holds that when there is a debtor who admits that he wrote a promissory note, the creditor need not ratify it in court in order to collect payment. And in this case, the giver cannot invalidate the deed by claiming that he was on his deathbed. But the rabbis hold that even when there is a debtor who admits that he wrote a promissory note, the creditor must still ratify it in court in order to collect payment, because there might be additional circumstances, like he was on a deathbed. So the Gemara asks, but didn't they already disagree with regard to this matter once? As it is taught in the Baraisa, with regard to witnesses who ratified their signatures, but claimed that at the time they signed the document, they were not fit to bear witness, their testimony is not deemed credible to invalidate the document. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir, and the rabbis say their testimony is deemed credible. Like, for example, when I was a witness, I wasn't actually fit to be a witness because I was married to the defendant, right? We're talking about a woman who made a statement, and I was her husband at the time. So I was not qualified to act as a witness. Now we're divorced, okay? So I could act as a witness, but then I was married to her. So, but no one knew that we were married. So can I now say that we were married at the time? Am I going to be believed to say that? Rabbi Meir would say no. The rabbis would say yes. The Gemara answered, because a spouse can't testify or witness for another spouse. Now the Gemara answers, it is necessary to state both cases, because if only that case with regard to witnesses who disqualified their own testimony was stated, one might think that the sages say that their testimony is accepted only in that case, due to the fact that the testimony of witnesses is powerful and they can impair the validity of a document. But here, with regard to him, the giver himself, who admitted that he wrote the deed of transfer, he admits that he wrote it. His claim is that he was on his deathbed at that moment, even though it's not written in the deed that he was on his deathbed. But with regard to him, the giver who admitted that he wrote the deed, but it is not in his power to impair the validity of the deed, I would say that his claim is not accepted. And if only this case with regard to a debtor who admits that he wrote a promissory note was stated, one might think that Rabbi Meir says that the giver cannot invalidate the deed only with regard to this case. But with regard to that other case where the witnesses ratified their signatures, I would say that Rabbi Meir concedes to the rabbis that witnesses can invalidate the deed. Therefore, it is necessary to state the dispute in both cases, because they're similar but not the same. It's enough about that. And Rabbah also says, with regard to the proof that the recipients must present, right? Again, what they're trying to say, that when this man gifted us all his property, either he was on his deathbed and then he died of that, and now they're coming to get it from the heirs, or if the man is now healthy and he's saying it's my property, when I gifted it to you, I was on my deathbed, and then I recovered. So I recovered, and that's why the current property is currently mine, and I don't have to give it to you. And the recipients say, you weren't on your deathbed when you gave it to us. You were healthy, right? So now, who has to prove? Does he have to prove that he was on his deathbed, or do they have to prove that he was healthy? Rabbah also says, with regard to the proof that the recipients must present, it is presented by bringing witnesses who testify that the giver was healthy. Abaye said to him, what is the reason for this? If we say that due to the fact that in all deeds of gift, the following formulation is written, when he was walking on his feet in the marketplace, which indicates that the gift was the gift of a healthy person, and in this deed, this formula is not written, therefore one may conclude from the deed that the giver was on his deathbed. Well, that is not correct. On the contrary, one could say that due to the fact that in all deeds concerning the gift of a person on his deathbed, the following formula is written when he was sick and lying in his bed. And in this deed, that formula is not written. Therefore, one may conclude from the deed that the giver was healthy, right? So most deeds of gift state, and the person is healthy. Most deeds of gift made on a deathbed state that this person was on his deathbed. But if we have a deed that doesn't state either that he was healthy or that he was on his deathbed, can we assume that it's one or the other? No, because the formula, there are two different formulas and neither one is present. We can't assume from the absence of the formula what the status was. Rabbah replied, since one can say this and one can say that, nothing can be concluded from the formulation of the deed. Therefore, due to the uncertainty, establish the property in the possession of its last known owner. Who's the last known owner? Was it the recipients or was it the giver who's like still in possession of the property? And this dispute with regard to the statement of the rabbis is also the subject of a dispute between other Amoraim, sages of the Gemara. As Rabbi Yochanan says, the proof is presented by bringing witnesses, and Reish Lakish says the proof is presented by ratification of the deed. Let's keep going. Rabbi Yochanan raised an objection to Reish Lakish from a Baraisa. There was an incident in Bnei Barak involving one who sold some of his father's property that he had inherited, and he died. And the members of his family came and contested the sale, saying he was a minor at the time of his death, and therefore the sale was not valid. And they came and they asked Rabbi Akiva, what is the law? Is it permitted to exhume the corpse in order to examine it and ascertain whether or not the heir was a minor at the time of his death? And Rabbi Akiva said to them, no, it is not permitted for you to disgrace him for the sake of a monetary claim. And furthermore, signs indicating puberty, since he was close to being an adult, but not quite. I mean, we're not sure whether he was an adult or not, but he was, right on the edge. So the signs of puberty, meaning that he would be a legal adult, are likely to change after death, and therefore nothing can be proved by exhuming the body. They didn't have, advanced CSI techniques to know exactly how old this person was from disinterring a body. So no, we're not going to exhume the body. So we don't know at the time that he was buried whether he was an adult who had the power to sell this property or a minor who didn't. Now we're on page 154b. So Rabbi Yochanan explains, granted, according to my explanation of the Mishna, that I say that the proof must be presented by bringing witnesses, I can explain the Baraisa. Since Rabbi Akiva said to the buyers, bring witnesses, and they did not find witnesses, this is the reason that they came and said to him, what is the law? Is it permitted to examine him? Is it permitted to exhume the body? But according to you, that you say that a proof is presented by ratification of the deed, why do they need to examine the body? Let them ratify their deed and they shall be established as owners of the property. Reish Lakish answers to Rabbi Yochanan, do you maintain that the property stood in the possession of the members of his family and the buyers came and contested their possession of the property? That's how it happened. Rather, the property was in the possession of the buyers and the members of the family came and contested the sale. Since they claimed that the deed was not valid, they could not prove their claim by ratifying the deed, but only by bringing witnesses or examining the body. And this too stands to reason. As Rabbi Akiva said to the claimants, you are not permitted to disgrace him, and they were silent. So granted, if you say that the members of his family were contesting the sale, due to that reason they were silent, as they accepted that they should not disgrace their relative. But if you say that the buyers were contesting the claim of the relatives, why were they silent? They should have said to Rabbi Akiva, we gave him money, and if our right to the property cannot be proven without disgracing him, let him be disgraced. They're not his relative, they don't care. The Gemara rejects this argument if it is due to that reason, i.e. this claim that they could have said, well, that is no conclusive argument. This is what Rabbi Akiva said to them. One reason to prohibit exhuming the body is that you are not permitted to disgrace a body. And furthermore, if you should say, he took the money, let him be disgraced, well, in any event, nothing can be proved by exhuming the body, as signs indicating that he was an adult are likely to change after death. You're not going to gain anything by exhuming the body, so what's the point of exhuming the body? The Gemara suggests, come in here a proof. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, i.e. Reish Lakish, asked Rabbi Yochanan about that which is taught in the Mishnah of Bar Kapara. Let's see how this is relevant. There was one who was continually enjoying the benefits from a field. And it was the presumption that it was his. Right? This guy was farming a field year after year, so everyone assumed he was the owner. Then someone came and contested his claim, saying, it's not your field, it's my field. And that person who was profiting from the field, the one who'd been working it for years, produced a deed in order to say, it is my field. As you who claim it's yours, you sold it to me. Or it is mine as you gave me this field as a gift. Whether it's you sold it to me or you gifted it to me, I have a deed that this is my field. If the one who protested his claim said, well, I don't recognize that deed as one that I have ever written, well, then the deed must be ratified through its signatures. If the one who protested his claim said, this is a document of appeasement called a shtar pasim. This is a document written only so that the holder should appear wealthy, or a document of trust, which means that I sold the field to you and provided you with the deed, trusting you to provide payment. And since you did not give me the money, the sale is void. Well then, if there are witnesses, follow the testimony of the witnesses. And if not, follow the deed. So Reish Lakish concludes, according to your explanation, the rabbis maintain that even if the deed is ratified, the claimants cannot take possession of the property without bringing witnesses. If so, shall we say that this baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that when there is a debtor who admits that he wrote a promissory note, the creditor is not required to ratify it in court in order to collect payment, and it is not in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis? And Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, no, we do not say that. As I say that everyone agrees that in the case of a debtor who admits that he wrote a promissory note, the creditor is not required to ratify it in court in order to collect payment. Here's the promissory note. The debtor admits that he wrote it. The creditor can now collect with it. Rabbi Reish Lakish asked, but don't they disagree? They don't all agree. As we learned in a baraisa, with regard to witnesses who ratified their signatures but claim that they were not fit to bear witness when they signed the deed, they admit they wrote it, but they're saying it was not a legally written document. They're saying that we wrote it, but we shouldn't have wrote it because it's not legal. Then their testimony is not deemed credible to invalidate the document according to Rabbi Meir. But the rabbis, meaning the majority who overrule Rabbi Meir, say that this witness is deemed credible to say that I was not a fit witness to sign that document. Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, but even if the testimony of witnesses is powerful and they impair the validity of the deed, which they admit that they have written, but which they claim they shouldn't have written, so with regard to him, that's the testimony of witnesses. But when you talk about the giver who's talking about his own property, that's not as powerful as witness testimony. With regard to him, the giver, is it in his power to impair the validity of a deed that he admits that he wrote? He's not a third-party witness. He's the guy who signed his own deed and sells, and now he's saying it wasn't a proper deed? Sure, that benefits him. Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, but wasn't it stated in your name with regard to the aforementioned incident in Bnei Barak that the members of his family contested the claim correctly, even though they admitted that the deed was authentic? And this means that the claimant is required to ratify the deed. So Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, that statement was stated in my name by Rabbi Elazar, my disciple, but I never said that. Rabbi Zera says, if Rabbi Yochanan denies the statement of Rabbi Elazar, his disciple, will Rabbi Yochanan also deny that which he said to Rabbi Yanai, his teacher? And this is as Rabbi Yanai says, that Rebbe says, when there is a debtor who admits that he wrote a promissory note, the creditor is not required to ratify it in court in order to collect payment. The debtor admits that he wrote the promissory note. I don't have to go find the witnesses who are here to ratify that those indeed are their witness signatures, and which may not be possible. The witnesses are in some other city or have died in the meantime. But I don't need to do that because the debtor himself admits that he wrote this promissory note. But there might be a problem with the promissory note, right? But we're saying it's enough. He admits that he wrote it. We can collect on it. Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Yanai, my teacher, is this not the case discussed in our Mishna, which states to the contrary? And the rabbis say the burden of proof rests upon the claimant. Somebody who's coming to collect a promissory note, he has the burden of proof. And he hasn't overcome his burden of proof when the guy who has the money says, yeah, I wrote that promissory note, right? So he admits he wrote the promissory note, but there may be other problems with this situation besides whether the promissory note was written by the debtor or not. Therefore, they still have a burden of proof to show that the totality of circumstances supports their extracting money from him. The burden of proof rests upon the claimants. Rabbi Yochanan concludes, and the proof mentioned in this Mishnah is nothing other than ratification of the deed. This indicates that Rabbi Yochanan maintains that according to the opinion of the rabbis, the recipient is required to ratify the deed. If so, why does he state that everyone agrees that the recipient is not required to ratify the deed? Rabbi Zera explains, indeed, the statement of our teacher, Rav Yosef, appears to be correct. Okay, what did Rav Yosef say? Rav Yosef says that Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says the opinions here should be reversed. This, the Baraisa taught by Bar Kapara, according to which the deed does not require ratification, is the statement of the rabbis. But Rabbi Meir says that when there is a debtor who admits that he wrote a promissory note, the creditor is not required to ratify it in court in order to collect payment. And what is the meaning of Rabbi Yochanan's statement that everyone agrees that in this case the recipient is not required to ratify the deed? What Rabbi Yochanan means is that this is the statement of the rabbis. And a statement of the rabbis is, and a statement of the rabbis that is disputed only by Rabbi Meir is tantamount to a statement accepted by all. The Gemara asks, but didn't we learn the opposite in the Mishnah? And the rabbis say that the burden of proof rests upon the claimant. This means that the recipient, here where he's coming to say that you gave us a gift, and when you did, you were healthy, not on your deathbed. This means that the recipient is required to ratify the deed. And the Gemara replies, reverse the opinions in the Mishnah. The Gemara asks, but isn't it taught in Baraisa with regard to witnesses who ratified their signatures but claimed that they were not fit to bear witness? Their testimony is not deemed credible to invalidate the document. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir, and the rabbis say their testimony is deemed credible. This indicates that according to the rabbis, the document requires ratification. The Gemara answers, here too reverse the opinions. Because there's a seeming contradiction, they're trying to work out, what do we do with the contradiction? Do we reverse the opinions? Do we bring in other opinions? What are we going to do? And the Gemara asks, but doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say, with regard to the proof, that the recipient is required to bring, that the proof is presented by bringing witnesses who testify that the giver was healthy, not by ratifying the deed? And the Gemara answers, and I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in. And the Gemara answers, reverse the opinions of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan maintains that the recipient is required to prove his claim only by ratifying the deed, whereas Reish Lakish maintains that the recipient is required to bring witnesses. And the Gemara asks, shall we say that we should also reverse the objection that Rabbi Yochanan raised to Reish Lakish previously and say that Reish Lakish raised the objection to Rabbi Yochanan? And the Gemara answers, no, that is unnecessary. This is what Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish. Granted, according to my explanation of the Mishnah, that I say that presenting proof through the ratification of the deed is sufficient in order to enable the recipient to claim the gift, this is the reason that with regard to the incident in Bnei Barak, you find the possibility that the buyers take possession of the property by ratifying the deed. It is therefore possible that the buyers held the property and the relatives were claiming it from them. But according to you, that you say that the proof must be presented by bringing witnesses, how can you find circumstances in which the buyers take possession of the property if they have no proof? Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, I concede to you with regard to a case where the members of the deceased's family contested the legality of the buyer's claim, that their contesting the legality of that claim is not taken into consideration since they are contesting the deed held by the buyers. It is therefore possible for the buyers to take possession of the property, as in this case. What do the relatives say? They say that the seller was a minor. But there is a presumption that witnesses do not sign the document unless the seller has become an adult. Why would witnesses sign a document if the seller was not an adult? It must have been ascertained that he was legally fit to sell the property. That's why there was a sale in the presence of witnesses. And if we know that they're legitimate witnesses and it was signed, we can presume that he was an adult when he sold it. And this is going to result in the buyers keeping the property and the heirs unable to get it back. In the Mishna, by contrast, right, where these people claim that the guy was healthy and he says he was on his deathbed, in the Mishna, by contrast, there is no presumption that counters the giver's claim that he was on his deathbed. In fact, the presumption is that he was on his deathbed, or why is he giving a gift? That's kind of unusual to give away all your property if you're not on your deathbed. The recipient, right, the one to whom the gift was made, they are required to bring proof that the giver was healthy, and not that the giver has to bring proof that he was on his deathbed. I know that was a tough journey, but the key that we were arguing back and forth is who bears the burden of proof, and based on what precedent can we establish that in this case it is the recipients of the gift who have to prove that this guy was healthy, not that the giver has to prove that he was on his deathbed. Okay, let's take some questions. And reminder, tomorrow, Thanksgiving. Happy Erev Thanksgiving. Tomorrow, we're going to have class at 1 p.m. Pacific. I would do it earlier if I could, but I have a commitment in the morning. I know that's going to be inconvenient for some people on the East Coast, and I apologize. Watch the replay. But I don't want to go without class tomorrow. So class tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific. And then Friday, we're going to get the new Friday schedule going during the winter, a little bit earlier and a shorter class because the East Coast people are butting up against Shabbos. So Friday, we'll have class at 11:30 a.m. Pacific, half hour early, and we'll keep it to a half hour long. Okay? So tomorrow, Thanksgiving, 1 p.m. Pacific. Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific. Nina reminding me, it is our annual campaign, donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. When you give to us, look, you're unbelievable, right? Here we have a Daf Yomi class that reaches 1,000 people every day. So many Torah articles that we publish, so many Torah videos, the unbelievable video about why Jews don't cremate that got to 500,000 people and resulted in dozens of people telling us that, I didn't know that. Now I'll make sure that my loved one or myself is not cremated. Nina's incredible Torah vorts in the weekly email blast. 2 or 3 commentaries from classic commentators digesting beautiful writing that Nina does in the weekly email bulletin, which you should definitely sign up for at accidentaltalmudist.org if not already. We are a nonprofit doing this, making all those videos, the new AT app, which is absolutely incredible, but if anyone's designed an app, it costs a lot of money to develop an app. All these costs, paying for our assistant, our webmaster, processing, everything that we do costs money. Our annual campaign right now is to raise $180,000 to fund the operations of our 501c3 nonprofit. We really need your help. So please go to accidentaltalmudist.org and you'll see the banner right there for the annual campaign, or just go straight to donate.accidentaltalmudist.org and help us out. establish a recurring donation. That's amazing. Helps us to, know that the money's going to be there, or make a one-time donation, but we really need your help to keep the lights on and keep creating this content every day. Bill, question. While someone who is on their deathbed, who then recovers, may retract all that they gave, assuming they make the other qualifications. So do they have to retract all of it? Interesting. Say Reuben is on his deathbed and he says, I give everything to my nephew Simon, who I love like a son. And then Reuben recovers, but he says to himself, I do indeed love Simon like a son, and I am old, so while I am not liable to die any moment, it cannot be far away, so I shall only retract from Simon enough for me to live on, but leave the rest to him so he may have a good start in his adult life. Can Reuben do this? For sure he can do that. What has he done? He has retracted the original gift because he recovered. Now he's healthy, and he is making the gift of a healthy person, and he's saying, take this amount of property, let's say 90% of his property. He's keeping 10% so that he has what to live off, no matter how many years he's going to last. And he's given the rest to Simon. Why can't he do that? The original gift is completely set aside. This is a new gift based on this reasoning, and he's explaining why he's doing it. Why couldn't he do that? Absolutely, he could do that. Sharon, if someone is on their deathbed, can they be considered of sound mind to make such a dramatic decision? Clearly, they required someone to be of sound mind and body, if not on their deathbed. And I would say that they do require somebody to be of sound mind when they make such a gift. I would say that the fact that they're on their deathbed doesn't prove that they're not of sound mind. So I think the assumption would be they are of sound mind, and now if the heirs are going to come and say, no, he wasn't, guess what? They're going to have the burden of proof. Joe, when someone is deemed to have been an invalid witness, isn't he prohibited from being a witness in any future legal proceeding? Not necessarily, because it may not be that they were maliciously giving testimony that they shouldn't have given. The case of like I was married to him and no one knew that we were married. That's too obvious. But maybe they testified for somebody that they grew up, in a kind of a group home, and they thought they were friends, and they later found out that they were brothers, right? Like they were neighbors, and they later found out that the father had a fling with the neighbor's wife, something like that. There was some unknown circumstance that the witness, when they originally testified and thought they were perfectly qualified to give the testimony, and then he later learned that he was unfit to give the testimony. So it's not because he was a liar, right? It was because there were some other circumstances. So there's no reason why we now presume that he's lying just because he was unfit earlier. So hopefully that answers the question. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, tomorrow, Thanksgiving, 1 p.m. Pacific. And we'll try to keep it efficient since I know it's a holiday. And then again, 11:30 a.m., half hour early on